The salt-laced air of Port Blossom, Maine, usually felt like a balm to my soul. I'd moved here 2 years ago, seeking the quiet comfort of a small coastal town after a relationship that had ended abruptly, leaving me wary and a little bruised. My apartment, a cosy second-floor walk-up with a bay window overlooking the harbour, was my sanctuary. I filled it with books, plants, and the scent of brewed coffee, trying to cultivate a sense of peace that felt fragile after years of walking on eggshells, albeit different kind than what was to come. My previous partner hadn't been abusive, just gone. One day he was there, talking about our future. The next he was packing a bag, citing some vague need for space. It taught me to be cautious, to look for solid ground beneath my feet. I wasn't actively looking for a new relationship when I met Ben Carter. My caution had settled into a comfortable routine of quiet evenings and tentative steps back into the world. I joined a local pottery class, hoping to channel my nervous energy into something tangible. Ben was there too, looking endearingly clumsy with a lump of clay, a wry smile playing on his lips. He had kind eyes, a gentle laugh, and a quiet strength that was immediately appealing. We talked about warped pots and the frustrating unpredictability of kilns, and it was easy. Effortlessly, wonderfully easy. After a few weeks of shared smiles and clay-covered hands, Ben asked me out for coffee at the Daily Grind, a little cafe downtown known for its strong brews and mismatched furniture. He was up front, almost immediately. "There's something you should know," he said, swirling his mug, his gaze steady. "I'm going through a divorce. It's complicated." He told me the story, stripped bare of dramatic flair but heavy with the weight of 6 lost years. The infidelity, the discovery, the toxic breakdown of the marriage, the seemingly endless legal battles with his ex-wife, Serafina. He didn't paint himself as a perfect victim, acknowledging the years of fighting and distance, but he was clear about the betrayal and Serafina's subsequent actions, her refusal to take responsibility, her attempts to blame him, the spiteful dragging out of the divorce proceedings. Listening to him, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. My past wariness flared. This was exactly the kind of complicated, messy drama I had been trying to avoid. But as Ben spoke, his vulnerability wasn't a weakness, it was a testament to his honesty. He wasn't hiding anything. He wasn't pretending his life was perfectly sorted. He was laying it all out, trusting me with it. And that, paradoxically, felt like the most stable ground I'd found in a long time. "Thank you for telling me," I said, choosing my words carefully. "That sounds incredibly difficult." He offered a small, tired smile. "It is. It feels like it's never going to end. Are you okay to be dating right now?" I asked, needing to be sure for both our sakes. He met my gaze, his eyes holding a depth of weariness I recognized from my own quiet struggles. "I think so," he said softly. "Meeting you, it's the first good thing that's happened in a long time. But I understand if it's too much. It was a lot. The thought of stepping into the orbit of someone with such a tumultuous past, with an active, hostile ex-wife, was daunting. But looking at Ben, at his genuine kindness and the clear effort he was making to be transparent, I felt something shift. My caution didn't disappear, but it was tempered by a growing sense of connection. "It's a lot," I agreed. "But I'd like to see where this goes, as long as you keep being honest with me." And he did. Our relationship developed slowly, built on long conversations, shared quiet moments, and mutual support. I learned about his job in town, his love for old movies, his surprisingly good cooking skills. He learned about my love for the sea, my slightly obsessive reading habits, my quiet life in Port Blossom. The divorce was a constant, low-grade hum of stress in the background of Ben's life, and by extension mine. He'd get frustrated calls from his lawyer, Mr. Davies, or vent about Serafina's latest delaying tactic or absurd demand for alimony despite her infidelity. I listened, offered comfort, and tried to be a calm harbour for him amidst the storm. "She's demanding half my retirement fund now," Ben said one evening, running a hand through his hair in exasperation. "After everything, it's just pure spite." "Mr. Davies thinks the screenshots will help, right?" I reminded him, referring to the evidence Ben had gathered of Serafina's texts after he caught her cheating. "Yeah, he's confident we can fight the alimony, but it just keeps dragging on. Every time we get close to an agreement, she finds some new way to stall." It was frustrating to witness, but it felt distant, like a problem confined to courtrooms and lawyers' offices. I had no direct contact with Serafina, and for the first few months she seemed content to wage her war through legal paperwork and passive-aggressive messages aimed at Ben. I was just the new girlfriend, a rumour, perhaps an annoyance, but not a target. Then, subtly, that began to change. It started small, almost imperceptibly. A car that looked exactly like Serafina's, a distinctive dark blue sedan, parked down the street from my apartment building one afternoon. It was gone an hour later. I shrugged it off. It could have been anyone. A week later, I was walking home from the grocery store when I saw the same car parked on a side street near my usual route. This time I saw someone inside. The windows were tinted, but I got a brief glimpse of dark hair pulled back tightly. My stomach clenched. It felt deliberate. I mentioned it to Ben. "I think I saw Serafina's car near my place again," I said, trying to sound casual. Ben frowned. "Really? Are you sure it was her?" "Pretty sure. It looked just like the one in the photos you showed me." Probably just a coincidence. Maybe she was visiting someone in the neighborhood." He didn't seem particularly concerned. "She knows better than to cause trouble. Mr. Davies warned her." I wanted to believe him. I tried to believe him. But the image of that dark car, that brief, unsettling glimpse of the person inside, stayed with me. The feeling of being watched intensified. When Ben and I were at our favorite cafe, I'd catch myself scanning the faces, feeling a prickle on the back of my neck. Was that her across the street? Was that her car driving slowly past? Most of the time it wasn't, but the possibility was enough to chip away at my sense of peace. Then came the message. It arrived via a mutual acquaintance, someone Ben knew from his old life who was still, confusingly, friends with Serafina. "Just so you know," the acquaintance messaged Ben, "Serafina asked about you, said she heard you were getting serious with some new friend. She seemed upset, said something weird like, 'Some people just don't know their place.'" Ben showed me the message, rolling his eyes. "See? Just trying to stir the pot. She hates that I've moved on. But some people just don't know their place." The phrase felt chilling. It wasn't just petty gossip, it felt like a veiled threat aimed not just at Ben, but at me. My anxiety, which had been a low hum, began to rise. I started checking my locks more often. I became hyper-aware of cars following me. The charm of Port Blossom, with its quiet streets and friendly faces, began to feel less like a sanctuary and more like a stage where I was being observed. "Are you sure she's not?" "You know, dangerous." I asked Ben one night, feeling a tremor in my voice. He pulled me closer, holding me tight. "Dangerous? Like physically?" "No, Elora. She's awful. She's manipulative. She's got a temper, but she's not violent. She just likes controlling things, and she's losing control of this situation. This is her lashing out, trying to make me miserable. She wants a reaction." He was so certain. His lawyer was certain. They saw Serafina's actions through the lens of a messy, high-conflict divorce. Frustrating, yes, but not life-threatening. I desperately wanted to trust their judgment, to believe that the knot of fear in my stomach was just my own past anxieties manifesting, amplified by the stress Ben was under. But the feeling persisted. The sense of a predator circling, unseen but felt. The escalation continued, subtle but undeniable. One afternoon, I found a dead bird placed neatly on the hood of my car. It was small, a sparrow, but the deliberate placement felt sinister. There was no note, nothing to connect it to Serafina, but the cold dread that washed over me felt like her signature. Ben was horrified. "That's sick," he said, his face pale. "Okay, that's not just trying to get a reaction. That's messed up." He called Mr. Davies, who advised them to document it and consider filing a police report for harassment, though without direct proof, it would be hard to pursue. We installed a cheap security camera outside my apartment door. We started being more careful about where we went, avoiding places Serafina might know about. But Port Blossom is a small town. There are only so many places to go. The tension was a constant companion, a tight band around my chest. It affected my sleep, my work, my ability to relax. Ben was incredibly supportive, doing his best to reassure me, to make me feel safe. He stayed over more often. We talked about self-defense classes, about getting pepper spray. It felt surreal, planning these things in our quiet coastal town. The divorce hearings ground on. Serafina remained unyielding, her demands outrageous, Her attitude in court, according to Ben, a performance of wronged innocence. It was clear her goal wasn't just a financial settlement. It was to punish Ben, to make his life as difficult as possible. And now it seemed to make mine difficult too. We tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, clinging to the quiet moments that had built our relationship. Walks along the rocky coast, dinners cooked together in my small kitchen, reading side by side on the sofa. These moments were precious, fragile islands in a sea of stress and growing fear. The fear was a living thing now. It wasn't just a feeling, it was a physical presence. It made my hands shake, made my heart pound at unexpected noises. I jumped at shadows. I checked my rearview mirror obsessively. Ben did his best, but he couldn't truly understand the depth of my unease, the way I felt exposed, vulnerable. He hadn't seen the dead bird, hadn't felt the chill of that car watching me. "She's playing games, Ilara," he'd say, holding me close. "She wants us to be scared. Don't let her win." I tried. I really tried. But the feeling that something terrible was coming, that Serafina's malice was escalating beyond petty harassment, was a premonition I couldn't shake. The day it happened was late spring, the air crisp, but the sun setting golden over the harbour. Ben and I had gone out for dinner at a restaurant on the edge of town, near a large, less-used parking lot that bordered a patch of woods and offered a shortcut to a walking path along the coast. It felt safe, away from the usual spots in the bustling downtown. We left the restaurant just as dusk was settling in, the sky turning shades of bruised purple and orange. We were talking about our plans for the weekend, laughing about a particularly bad pot I had made in class. The air was cool and smelled of pine and salt. It was a moment of perfect, ordinary peace. And then I heard it. The sudden, violent roar of an engine accelerating. Not just speeding up, but flooring it. It was too loud, too fast, too close. My head snapped up. A car was peeling out from the far end of the parking lot, headlights glaring, tires squealing. It was coming straight for us. There was no time to think, only react. "Ben!" I screamed, grabbing his arm. He saw it too, his eyes widening in horror. He shoved me, trying to push me out of the way, but it was too late. The car was on us. The impact was like being hit by a train. A sickening crunch of metal and bone. Excruciating pain exploded in my left leg. I heard a scream, sharp and tearing, my own. I fell to the asphalt, Ben falling with me, shielding me instinctively with his body. The world tilted, a dizzying mess of pain and terror. The car screeched again, not driving away, but stopping. Then, horrifyingly, the sound of the engine roaring again, the tires protesting as it reversed. It was coming back. "Oh God, Ilara, your leg!" Ben gasped, his voice choked with fear. I looked down. My leg was bent at an impossible, grotesque angle. The pain was unbearable, a white-hot agony that made it hard to breathe. But the sight of that car backing up, preparing to come at us again, was a terror that eclipsed even the pain. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. She was trying to kill us. "Ben, we have to move," I cried, adrenaline surging through me despite the agony. He didn't hesitate. Ignoring my broken leg, ignoring the risk to himself, he grabbed me under the arms. Okay, hold on." He started dragging me, pulling my dead weight across the rough asphalt towards the narrow space between two parked cars. Every movement sent searing pain through my leg, a fresh wave of agony that tore another scream from my throat. I know, I'm so sorry," he muttered, his face grim, sweat beading on his forehead. The car lunged forward again, the engine screaming. We weren't fast enough. It slammed into the parked cars we were trying to hide behind with a deafening crash. Metal shrieked and crunched. Airbags deployed. Car alarms in a dozen vehicles erupted into a cacophony of panicked wails. We crumpled into the narrow gap, shielded by the mangled metal. My leg throbbed, a relentless blinding pain. Ben held me tight, his body shaking. The air filled with the smell of gasoline, hot metal, and something acrid like burnt rubber. Through the ringing in my ears and the blare of alarms, I heard shouting. People running, doors opening, and then the driver's side door of the attacking car opened. I looked, my eyes blurry with pain and tears. Serafina. She stepped out of the car as if she were arriving for a casual dinner. Her hair was perfectly styled, her clothes neat. In the dim light of the parking lot and the flashing hazard lights, her face was unnervingly composed, almost blank. Only her eyes, fixed on us, burned with a cold, intense hatred that made my blood run cold. It was the face of someone who had just tried to end our lives and felt absolutely no remorse. "It's her," I whispered, the words barely audible over the chaos. Ben didn't need me to say it. He saw her, his protective stance hardened, his body tensing between me and her. She started walking towards us, her footsteps unnervingly calm amidst the pandemonium. Click, click, click on the asphalt. It sounded like a death march. "You shouldn't have made him happy," she said, her voice carrying surprisingly clearly over the noise, devoid of emotion, chillingly matter-of-fact. She was almost upon us when a man, one of the bystanders who had rushed over, tackled her from the side. He was a big man, solid like a tree trunk. Serafina went down hard, crying out in surprise and rage. She struggled against him, thrashing and yelling, but he held her fast. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Ben stayed focused on me, checking my leg, his hands gentle despite the urgency. "Just hold on, Alara. The ambulance is coming. The police are coming." I couldn't take my eyes off Serafina, still struggling on the ground, being held by the bystander. This woman, this perfectly manicured person, had just tried to murder us. The disconnect between her appearance and her actions was horrifying. She wasn't a monster with fangs and claws. She was just Serafina. And that was terrifying. The police arrived first, lights flashing, adding to the chaotic light show. They quickly assessed the scene, the wrecked cars, the injured people. Several officers converged on Serafina, who was now being handcuffed, still yelling incoherently about Ben, about betrayal, about how this was all his fault. "She just kept yelling about how I wasn't supposed to be back early that day," Ben murmured, shaking his head in disbelief. Even then. Paramedics arrived and gently, carefully began to stabilize my leg. The pain was still immense, but their calm efficiency was a small anchor in the storm. They gave me something for the pain, and the edges of the world began to soften. As they loaded me onto a stretcher, I saw Serafina being led away by the police. She glanced at me, her eyes still burning with that cold fire before an officer guided her into the back of a cruiser. Ben rode with me in the ambulance to the hospital. He held my hand, stroking my hair, his presence a source of comfort amidst the pain and fear. "She tried to kill us," I whispered, the reality of it hitting me fully. "I know," he said, his voice rough. "I know. I am so sorry, Alara. This is my fault. This is because of her." "It's not your fault, Ben," I said, squeezing his hand. "It's hers." At the hospital, the diagnosis was grim but not life-threatening, a severely fractured tibia and fibula in my left leg, requiring surgery to implant pins and plates. The recovery would be long and difficult. Detective Miller, the lead investigator on the case, came to the hospital to take my statement. He was a calm, methodical man with kind eyes that held a flicker of professional outrage. Ben had already given his statement. "Based on witness accounts and the scene," Detective Miller explained, "it appears Miss Hayes deliberately targeted you. Several people saw her car circle the lot before accelerating. The fact that she backed up for a second attempt is damning. We've also secured CCTV footage from a nearby business that confirms her actions." He showed us a still image from the footage. It was blurry, but unmistakable. Serafina's car, positioned, aiming. She was charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and attempted murder, Detective Miller stated. "Given the evidence, we feel confident in the charges." Attempted murder. The words hung in the air, heavy and chilling. This wasn't just a messy divorce anymore. This was a violent criminal act. The following weeks were a blur of pain medication, hospital routines, and the quiet hum of fear that now had a concrete source. Ben was a constant presence, a rock. He stayed by my side, helping with everything, anticipating my needs before I even voiced them. He brought me books, read to me, just sat with me in the quiet moments. Arthur, my friend, visited often, bringing flowers and dark humor that managed to coax a few weak smiles from me. "Only you, Alara," Arthur joked gently, "could get hit by a car driven by your boyfriend's crazy ex-wife in a charming coastal town." Adds a certain je ne sais quoi to the dating profile. The humor helped, a little. It was a way to acknowledge the sheer absurdity of the situation, the way my quiet life had been violently interrupted by someone else's rage. As I slowly transitioned from the hospital to recovering at home, the legal process moved forward. Ben kept me updated. Serafina remained in custody, denied bail. Mr. Davies was now working closely with the prosecutors on the criminal case, as the attempted murder had a massive impact on Ben's divorce proceedings. Mr. Davies says the judge in the divorce case is less sympathetic to Serafina now, Ben reported, a hint of grim satisfaction in his voice. Apparently, attempting to run over your soon-to-be ex-husband and his new girlfriend doesn't look great when you're asking for alimony. The criminal trial felt like another ordeal I had to survive. My leg was still in a heavy cast, mobility limited, but I was determined to testify. I needed to face her, to tell the court what she had done. The courthouse in Port Blossom was an old, imposing building, smelling faintly of polished wood and stale coffee. Walking into the courtroom, even with Ben's arm supporting me and using crutches, felt like entering a different world. And there she was, Serafina, sitting at the defense table, looking normal. She wore a plain but neat outfit, her hair styled simply. She didn't look like someone who had tried to kill two people. She looked like she was waiting for a bus. Her lawyer tried to paint a picture of a woman driven to a moment of temporary insanity by the stress of a bitter divorce and the pain of seeing her husband move on. A moment of poor judgment, fueled by emotion. But the prosecution had the evidence. Witness testimony from bystanders who saw the deliberate nature of the act, the damage to the cars showing the force of the impact, and the CCTV footage. Detective Miller played it for the jury. Seeing that car, moving with chilling purpose, targeting us, was like reliving the nightmare. My testimony was difficult, recounting the sound, the impact, the pain, the terror of her coming back for a second pass, seeing Serafina's face as she got out of the car. I tried to keep my voice steady, to focus on the facts, but the emotion was raw. I looked directly at Serafina as I spoke. Her expression remained blank. Ben testified too, detailing the history of the divorce, the escalating harassment, her attempts to provoke him, and his own experience of the attack. The jury deliberated for less than a day. Guilty, on all counts, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, attempted murder. A wave of relief washed over me so profound it made me dizzy. It wasn't over, not really, but she was held accountable. Sentencing was a few weeks later. The courtroom was packed. The prosecution argued for a significant sentence, emphasizing the premeditation, the violence, the lack of remorse. Serafina's lawyer pleaded for leniency, highlighting her lack of prior record, her remorse, which felt entirely performative, and the emotional distress of the divorce. Serafina herself spoke, offering a tearful, halting apology. "I wasn't myself that day," she mumbled, wiping away tears that didn't seem to reach her eyes. "I was under so much stress. I deeply regret my actions." It was a chilling performance. The judge handed down the sentence. 15 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after 10 for good behavior. 15 years for attempted murder. Ben squeezed my hand. It felt inadequate. 15 years for trying to end 2 lives, for shattering my leg and our sense of safety. But it was something. It was justice, imperfect as it was. As she was led away in handcuffs, Serafina glanced back, her eyes locking onto mine for a fleeting second. The mask of remorse slipped, and I saw it again, that cold, burning hatred. It was a stark reminder that prison might contain her body, but it wouldn't cure her malice. With the criminal case concluded, the divorce proceedings wrapped up swiftly. Mr. Davies didn't even have to fight hard. The judge, true to Ben's lawyer's prediction, was utterly unsympathetic to a convicted attempted murderer's financial claims. Serafina received nothing, no alimony, no share of assets, nothing from Ben's retirement, just her personal belongings. It felt like a small, practical victory, a clear consequence of her actions. The house Ben had shared with Serafina felt tainted. He couldn't stay there. Too many ghosts, too many memories, too much betrayal and near-fatal violence. We decided to find a new place together in Port Blossom, a fresh start. We found a charming old house on a quiet street, with a small garden and lots of natural light. It felt safe. It felt like ours. My recovery was a long, grueling process. Months of physical therapy, pushing through pain and frustration. Learning to walk again, first with crutches, then a cane, then finally, tentatively, on my own. There were setbacks, moments of despair and persistent pain. But there were also small victories. Taking a few steps, walking around the block, finally being able to stand for a full session in my pottery class again. The emotional scars were harder to heal. Anxiety was a constant companion. Loud noises made me jump. I had nightmares about the car, about Serafina's face. Parking lots became places of intense fear. Ben was there for all of it. He came to physical therapy appointments, celebrated small milestones, held me when the nightmares came. He was patient, understanding, and unwavering in his support. Our shared trauma forged a bond between us that was unbreakable. We had faced something horrific together, and we had survived. We talked about the lingering shadow of Serafina's eventual release. It was a reality we couldn't ignore. Ben's lawyer advised getting restraining orders when the time came. My father, who happened to be a retired police officer and firearms instructor, a detail from the original story that felt relevant now, insisted we both learn how to defend ourselves. We took self-defense classes. We got our concealed carry permits, learning how to safely handle a firearm. It felt strange, juxtaposing the quiet beauty of our lives in Port Blossom with the need to be prepared for potential violence, but it was necessary. We didn't let the fear consume us. We chose to live our lives fully, to find joy in the small things, to build our future. We went back to pottery class, to walks along the coast, though we were careful about where we parked. We filled our new home with laughter, books, and the comforting presence of each other. Looking back now, from the vantage point of a year later, it still feels surreal. That my quiet life in a small Maine town was shattered by such extreme violence. That a messy divorce could escalate to attempted murder. That I was targeted by a woman I barely knew, simply because I loved the man she couldn't control. But I also see the resilience. Ben's strength, my own determination to recover, the unwavering support we found in each other and our friends. We didn't let Serafina win. She tried to destroy us, but instead, she inadvertently cleared the path for us to build something stronger, something real, free from the toxicity she represented. Ben and I are talking about getting married next spring. We want a small ceremony, maybe by the water, a celebration of survival, of resilience, and of finding love in the most unexpected, chaotic circumstances. We still live in Port Blossom. We love this town, but we don't park in that particular parking lot anymore. And sometimes, when the wind carries the scent of the sea, I feel a tremor of the old fear. But then I look at Ben, at the life we've built, and I remember that even in the face of darkness there is light. And we found ours, here, together. The first few months after the attack were the hardest. The physical pain from the broken leg was relentless, a deep, aching throb that medication could only dull, never erase. Surgery to insert the metal plates and screws was successful, but it meant weeks of being non-weight-bearing, confined mostly to the sofa in my apartment, my leg elevated, heavy in its cast. Simple tasks became monumental challenges. Getting a glass of water, going to the bathroom, changing clothes, everything required assistance or immense effort. Beyond the physical agony was the psychological trauma. Sleep was elusive, haunted by replays of the attack. The roar of the engine, the sickening crunch, the blinding pain, and worst of all, Serafina's face as she got out of the car. I'd wake up gasping, heart pounding, the phantom pain in my legs searingly real. During the day I was jumpy, easily startled by loud noises. A car backfiring, a sudden shout outside, they would send a jolt of fear through me, my body reacting as if the threat was imminent again. Ben was my anchor during this time. He took time off work, rearranging his schedule to be with me. He cooked meals, helped me move around, sat with me during the long hours of physical discomfort and emotional distress. He never complained, never made me feel like a burden. He just was there, a steady, comforting presence. He'd talk to me, distracting me with stories from his day or reading aloud. He'd hold my hand when the fear became overwhelming. He'd listen patiently when I needed to talk about the nightmares, about the anger and confusion I felt towards Serafina. Why? I'd ask him sometimes, the question raw. Why me? She didn't even know me. Ben would sigh, stroking my hair. Because you represent me moving on, Elara. You represent me finding happiness after her. And she couldn't stand that. It wasn't personal, not really. You were just in the way of her control, her narrative. It was a chilling thought, that I was just an object, a problem to be eliminated in her twisted worldview. It made her seem less like a person and more like a force of nature, destructive and irrational. Arthur visited frequently, a breath of fresh air and normalcy. He'd bring books from the local bookstore, snacks, and his signature dry wit. He didn't dwell on the trauma, but acknowledged it with empathy. He'd tell funny stories about his own life, complain about work, just treat me like a normal person who happened to be temporarily sidelined. It was a relief to have moments where the attack wasn't the central topic of conversation. "So, are we thinking of getting you a tank for future dates?" Arthur quipped one afternoon, helping me adjust my pillows. I managed a weak laugh. Maybe a bulletproof scooter. "Small-town dating is wild, man," he shook his head, grinning. "Forget swiping right, you gotta check police records." Dark humor, yes, but it helped. It was a way to reclaim some control, to laugh in the face of something utterly terrifying. Physical therapy started while I was still in the cast, gentle range-of-motion exercises, trying to keep the muscles from atrophying completely. Once the cast came off, the real work began. It was painful, agonizingly so. My leg was stiff, weak, and bruised. Bending my knee felt like tearing tissue. Putting even a little weight on it sent jolts of pain up my spine. My physical therapist, Sarah, was firm but kind. "It's going to hurt," she warned me on the first day. "But you have to push through it. Your bone is healed, but your muscles need to rebuild, and your brain needs to trust your leg again." That last part was harder than the physical pain. My brain remembered the impact, the snap, the way my leg had failed me. Every time I tried to put weight on it, a flicker of fear shot through me. What if it broke again? What if it couldn't hold me? Ben came to many of my appointments, watching from the corner of the room, offering quiet encouragement. Seeing him there, witnessing the difficult, unglamorous reality of my recovery, strengthened my resolve. I wasn't just doing this for myself. I was doing it for us, for the future we wanted to build. Progress was slow, frustratingly slow. There were days when I felt like I was making no headway, days when the pain was too much, days when the fear won. But Sarah kept pushing me, and Ben kept supporting me. Slowly, gradually, I started to regain strength. A few steps with crutches, then walking with one crutch, then transitioning to a cane. Each small step felt like a triumph, a victory against the woman who had tried to take my ability to walk away from me. Meanwhile, the legal process continued its slow march. Serafina's trial date was set. Mr. Davies kept Ben informed, explaining the procedures, the evidence, the likely timeline, the CCTV footage, the witness testimonies, Ben's statements, my statements. The prosecution was building a strong case. "Her lawyer is trying to argue temporary insanity," Ben told me after a meeting with Mr. Davies, "that the stress of the divorce made her snap. Mr. Davies isn't worried. Premeditation is clear on the video. She circled the lot. She waited. That wasn't a sudden snap. The thought of her circling, waiting, deliberately choosing the moment sent shivers down my spine. It wasn't a crime of passion fueled by seeing Ben with me in that instant. It was planned, calculated. That made it even more terrifying. As the trial date approached, my anxiety spiked again. I knew I would have to testify. Facing Serafina in court, recounting the most terrifying moment of my life, it felt like another mountain to climb. Ben offered to stay with me the night before my testimony. We sat on the sofa in my apartment, the harbour lights twinkling outside the bay window. My leg ached, a dull, constant reminder of why we were facing this ordeal. "You don't have to do this, you know," Ben said softly, holding my hand. "You can testify via video link if it's too much." "No," I said, shaking my head. "I need to do this. I need to look her in the eye. She tried to erase me, Ben, like I didn't matter. I matter, and she needs to see that." He squeezed my hand, his eyes filled with understanding. "Okay, I'll be right there with you." The day of my testimony was bright and cold. Walking into the courthouse on my crutches, the weight of the moment pressed down on me. Security was tight. Inside the courtroom, the air was formal and tense. I took the stand, adjusted my crutches, and sat down. The prosecutor was kind, guiding me through the events. I recounted meeting Ben, our relationship, the divorce stress, the subtle signs of being watched, the dead bird, the growing fear. And then the parking lot, the sound, the speed, the impact, the pain, her backing up, Ben pulling me, the crash, her getting out of the car, her face, her words. I looked at Serafina. She watched me, her expression flat, unreadable. For a moment the courtroom faded away, and it was just us, her malice palpable across the room. I finished my testimony, my voice stronger than I expected. It felt like a release a reclaiming of my voice, my story. Cross-examination was difficult. Serafina's lawyer was less aggressive than I had feared, perhaps wary of alienating the jury given my visible injury and crutches. He focused on my relationship with Ben, implying that I had somehow inserted myself into a volatile situation, that maybe Ben had exaggerated Serafina's behavior. I answered calmly, sticking to the facts. I hadn't inserted myself. I had simply fallen in love with a good man who was trying to escape a toxic marriage. Leaving the stand felt like shedding a heavy cloak. I was done. It was in the hands of the court now. Ben testified after me, strong and credible. He detailed the history of the marriage, the infidelity, Serafina's attempts to manipulate him, the texts he had saved, her bizarre behavior after he caught her. He described the attack from his perspective, his fear for my life, his struggle to get me to safety. He described the toll the divorce had taken on him, and how finding me had brought him hope, which Serafina had then tried to extinguish violently. Other witnesses followed, the bystanders who had seen the attack and apprehended Serafina, the police officers who responded, the forensic experts who analysed the scene and the car, Detective Miller presenting the CCTV footage. The evidence was overwhelming. Serafina's defence was weak, relying heavily on her lawyer's narrative of emotional breakdown and her own carefully staged performance of remorse. But the cold, calculated nature of her actions on the video contradicted her tearful apologies. She didn't look distraught before the attack. She looked focused. She even checked her makeup in the rearview mirror, according to Detective Miller, right before she accelerated towards us. That detail, small and chilling, spoke volumes about her state of mind. The jury returned the guilty verdict quickly. A palpable wave of relief swept through the courtroom. Ben squeezed my hand, hard. We had done it. We had faced her, told our truth, and the system had seen through her lies. Sentencing was the final act. The judge listened to the arguments, reviewed the evidence, considered the impact statements, mine and Ben's, read by the prosecutor. Serafina gave her final, tearful plea. When the judge announced the sentence, 15 years, a complex mix of emotions washed over me. Relief that it wasn't probation, that she would be locked away. Frustration that it wasn't more. That 15 years felt insufficient for the trauma she had inflicted, for the lives she had tried to take. But also a strange sense of closure. It was over. For now. As she was led away, her eyes met mine one last time. There was no remorse, no sadness, just that cold, hard look. A promise of something unresolved, even behind bars. The divorce was finalised almost immediately after the sentencing. Mr. Davies called with the news. Judge didn't waste any time, he said, sounding pleased. With the criminal conviction, her claims were dead in the water. You're free and clear, Ben. No alimony, no assets, just her personal effects. It felt like a final, definitive severing of ties. She had tried to destroy us, and in the end, she had destroyed her own claims. The decision to move was easy. The apartment, once my sanctuary, felt vulnerable. Every time I looked out the window, I saw that street where the car had parked. Every time I walked through the door, I remembered the dead bird. We needed a fresh start, a place that held no echoes of her malice. We found a small, older house on the other side of Port Blossom. It wasn't fancy, but it had good bones, a sense of solid permanence, and a small, overgrown garden that promised the chance to create something new. It had big windows that let in the main light, a creaky staircase, and no ghosts of past betrayals or attempted murders. My physical therapy continued, less frequent now, but still necessary. The pain was manageable most days, a dull ache rather than a searing fire. I could walk without crutches or a cane, though I still favoured my injured leg sometimes, especially when I was tired. The limp was barely noticeable, a subtle reminder of what I had survived. The psychological healing was slower, a more complex process. I still had moments of anxiety, particularly in crowded or open spaces. Parking lots were still challenging, a place where my body tensed, my eyes scanned frantically. I started seeing a therapist, someone who specialised in trauma. Talking through the events, processing the fear and the anger, helped. I learned coping mechanisms, ways to ground myself when the panic started to rise. Ben was patient, always patient. He never pushed me to do things I wasn't ready for. He'd offer his arm in parking lots, stand between me and potential threats without making a fuss. He understood, in a way no one else could, the lingering shadow of what had happened. We took the self-defense classes together, learning practical ways to protect ourselves. My dad taught the firearms safety course, his face serious as he guided us through the steps. Holding the weight of a handgun felt strange, heavy with responsibility but also empowering. It wasn't about living in fear, it was about refusing to be a victim again. It was about having options, about feeling capable of defending the life we were building. We installed a good security system in the new house, better lighting, cameras covering the perimeter, small steps that added up to a greater sense of safety. Serafina was in prison now, a physical distance separating us. But the knowledge that she would eventually be released was a reality we lived with. We would get the restraining orders when the time came. We would stay vigilant, but we wouldn't let her control our lives from behind bars. We wouldn't let the fear she had inflicted dictate our every move. We focused on building our life together. We gardened, coaxing flowers and vegetables from the overgrown beds. We cooked together, filling the house with warm smells. We read side by side, sharing passages, discussing ideas. We walked along the coast near our new home, listening to the waves, feeling the peace settle over us. My leg still ached sometimes, a dull throb that served as a reminder. The scars from the surgery were visible, a map of the trauma I had endured, but they were also a testament to my resilience, to the fact that I had healed. Ben and I talked about the future, about marriage, about what we wanted our life to be. It wasn't the future I had envisioned before meeting him, before the chaos. It was a future shaped by trauma, yes, but also by survival, by deep connection, by a love that had been tested under unimaginable pressure and had not broken. We learned to appreciate the quiet moments even more, the simple beauty of an ordinary day in Port Blossom. The way the light hit the water in the morning, the smell of salt and pine, the friendly faces in the local shops. These were the things we were fighting for, the life we were protecting. We don't dwell on what happened constantly. It's part of our story, a dark chapter, but not the whole book. We talk about it when we need to, process it, support each other. But mostly we focus on the present, on the future, on the life we are actively choosing to build, day by day. Sometimes someone will ask about my leg, about the limp. I usually just say it was an accident. The full story is too much for casual conversation. But the people who know, our friends, our families, they see the strength it took, the journey we've been on. Port Blossom feels like home. This house feels like home. And being with Ben here, building our life together, feels like coming home after a very long, very dangerous journey. We know the shadow is still there, in the background. But we face it together, prepared, vigilant, but not afraid to live, not afraid to be happy, not afraid to love. Current part characters, 4,000. Total characters, 7,956. The small, tight-knit community of Port Blossom, while initially feeling like a safe haven, also meant that news travelled fast. The attempted murder in the park parking lot became the talk of the town. Everyone knew about it. Everyone knew who Serafina Hayes was, and everyone knew who Ben and I were. It added another layer of weirdness to the whole ordeal. People would stare, sometimes with pity, sometimes with morbid curiosity. Shopkeepers who knew me would offer quiet words of support. It was strange to have such a deeply personal, terrifying event become public knowledge, dissected and discussed by strangers. Ben handled it with grace, acknowledging people's concerns, but politely deflecting questions about the gorier details. I found it harder. I retreated into myself a bit, preferring the safety of my apartment, then later our new house. The thought of going out, of being seen, of knowing that everyone knew what had happened to my leg and who had done it, was daunting. My therapist helped me work through this. She encouraged me to gradually re-engage with the community, to not let fear isolate me. She pointed out that the townspeople weren't judging me, they were expressing concern and solidarity. It was a slow process, but eventually I started venturing out more, first with Ben, then on my own. The familiar routine of picking up coffee at the daily grind, browsing the shelves at the local bookstore, a different one than where Ben and I met intentionally, chatting with the friendly faces behind the counters. It helped reclaim a sense of normalcy, a sense of belonging in this town that had witnessed my trauma, but also offered a place to heal. The bookstore was still a special place for us, though. Not the one where we met, not yet. That one still felt too close to the edge of everything. But finding new bookstores, exploring dusty shelves together, the quiet ritual of browsing and recommending books, it was a cornerstone of our relationship, a reminder of the easy connection we'd found before the storm hit. We'd spend hours in places like Sherman's Main Coast Bookshop in Boothbay Harbour, just an hour up the coast, losing ourselves in different worlds, finding solace in stories. It was a form of escape, but also a way of reinforcing the foundation of our connection. Ben's job in town was understanding, thankfully. While he had to take time off immediately after the attack and for court appearances, his company was supportive, recognizing the extraordinary circumstances. My own work as a freelance graphic designer allowed me more flexibility, which was crucial during my recovery. I could work from home, setting my own hours around physical therapy appointments and days when the pain or anxiety were too much. The ability to continue working, to have that sense of purpose and routine, was important for my mental health. It was a piece of my old life that I could hold on to, a reminder that I was still capable, still me, despite everything. The financial impact of the attack was significant, despite Serafina losing the divorce settlement. My medical bills were astronomical, even with insurance. Lost income during the initial phase of recovery added to the strain. Ben helped shoulder the burden, never making me feel responsible. We managed, dipping into savings, tightening our belts. It was another stressor, but one we faced together, pooling our resources, making decisions as a team. It was a practical, unromantic aspect of our shared reality, but facing it together strengthened our partnership. One evening, months after the trial, Ben and I were sitting in the living room of our new house. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow through the windows. I was reading and he was sketching in a notebook. A comfortable silence settled between us. "You know," I said without looking up from my book, "sometimes I still can't believe it happened, like it was a movie or a bad dream." Ben put down his pen. "I know. Me neither. It feels unreal that someone I was married to, someone I shared my life with for 6 years, could do that. It's the normal that's the most terrifying," I mused. She didn't look like a monster. She looked like a person who just decided to run us over. "Yeah," Ben agreed, his voice quiet. "That's what got me too. In the courtroom, her just sitting there, like it was all a misunderstanding. Her checking her makeup," I added, a shiver going down my spine. "Right before, Detective Miller told us that. It's the detail that haunts me the most." "Me too," Ben said, like she was getting ready for her mugshot, like it was all part of the plan. We sat in silence for a few minutes, letting the weight of it settle. It was important, I realized, to have these moments, to acknowledge the darkness, to not bury it. But it was also important not to let it consume us. "But we're here," I said, finally closing my book. "In this house, together." Ben smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his kind eyes. "Yeah, we are." He got up and came over to the sofa, sitting beside me and pulling me close. "She didn't win." "No," I agreed, leaning my head on his shoulder. "She definitely didn't win." We talked about the future more concrete terms now. Marriage felt like a natural next step, not a rushed decision born of trauma, but a deepening of a bond that had proven its strength. We weren't naive. We knew that marrying Ben meant marrying into a history that included Serafina. We would always have to be mindful, always have to take precautions, but the love we shared, the life we were building, felt bigger and stronger than the fear. We started planning, tentatively at first, looking at venues in Port Blossom, thinking about guest lists, imagining a simple, joyful celebration. It felt incredibly precious, this act of planning a future together, a deliberate choice for happiness in the face of the past. My physical recovery continued to improve. The limp became less pronounced, the pain less frequent. I could walk for longer distances, hike some of the coastal trails that had once felt impossible. I even started running again, short distances at first, then longer. The feeling of my body moving freely, powerfully, was incredibly liberating. It was a physical manifestation of my resilience, a defiant act against the injury I had sustained. The scars on my leg were permanent reminders, but they no longer felt like badges of victimhood. They were proof that I had been broken and had put myself back together. They were part of my story. We kept up the self-defense training, the firearms practice. It became a routine, like going to the gym. It wasn't about living in fear, but about being prepared. It gave me confidence, a sense of agency I had lost for a while. Knowing that I had the skills and the means to protect myself and Ben, if ever needed, was empowering. We also focused on the positive aspects of our lives, our friends, our families, who had been incredibly supportive throughout everything, our work, our hobbies, our community in Port Blossom. We actively sought out joy, cultivated gratitude for the life we had. Sometimes when I'm walking down a street or in a parking lot, I still feel that flicker of anxiety, that urge to scan my surroundings. It's a reflex, a learned response. But it doesn't control me anymore. I acknowledge it, take a deep breath, and keep going. I refuse to let Serafina steal the simple act of walking from me or the freedom of moving through the world. Ben and I are getting married next spring, just as we planned. The invitations are sent, the venue booked, a beautiful old inn overlooking the harbour. We chose a date that feels right, a time of renewal. We know that Serafina will eventually be eligible for parole, and eventually she will be released. The thought is unsettling, a cold knot in my stomach, but we will be ready. We have the legal protections in place, the training, the security measures, and most importantly, we have each other. Our love story isn't a fairy tale. It's messy, complicated, and bears the scars of trauma, but it's also a story of resilience, of finding light in the darkness, of building something beautiful from the wreckage. Port Blossom, our quiet, picturesque coastal town, holds both the memory of a nightmare and the reality of a life saved, a life reborn. The sea air still feels like a balm, maybe even more so now. It reminds me that even after the fiercest storms, the tide always comes back in, bringing with it the promise of a new beginning. We found each other over books, and now we're writing our own story. A story with challenges, yes, and a villain who casts a long shadow, but ultimately a story about love, survival, and the enduring power of hope. The period leading up to the trial was a strange mix of intense focus and emotional exhaustion. Every meeting with Mr. Davies, every review of the evidence pulled me back into the nightmare. But it also felt necessary, a crucial step towards closure and justice. Detective Miller was meticulous, ensuring every detail was covered, every witness prepared. Knowing that law enforcement was taking this so seriously, that they saw the clear intent behind Serafina's actions, was validating. It wasn't just my trauma, it was a crime the state was prosecuting, seeking accountability for. Serafina's lawyer, a slick, older man, tried every angle. He argued that the CCTV footage was inconclusive, that the witnesses were mistaken, that the car damage was consistent with an accidental loss of control due to road conditions or a sudden mechanical failure. He even tried to suggest that Ben and I had somehow provoked Serafina, perhaps by taunting her or displaying overt affection in her presence. A ridiculous claim, given that we hadn't even seen her until she was accelerating towards us. It was clear they were grasping at straws, trying to create enough doubt to sway the jury. The most infuriating part of the defense strategy was their attempt to portray Serafina as a fragile woman driven to a breaking point by the stress and betrayal of the divorce. They brought up her father's death again, painting a picture of grief and emotional instability. While I acknowledged that grief could impact a person, it didn't excuse attempting to murder two people in a public place. It felt like a gross manipulation of genuine pain to excuse monstrous behavior. My testimony was nerve-wracking, but as I mentioned, necessary. Sitting on the stand facing the courtroom felt surreal. The judge was a stern-faced woman who seemed to tolerate no nonsense. The jury members looked like ordinary people, a mix of ages, backgrounds, expressions ranging from attentive to seemingly bored. It was hard to believe that these 12 strangers held Serafina's fate, and implicitly a measure of our future safety, in their hands. Recounting the attack was the hardest part. My voice cracked initially when describing the impact and the pain, but I pushed through. Describing Serafina getting out of the car, her expression, that was the part that truly conveyed the malice, the chilling lack of humanity in that moment. I focused on the facts, on the sensory details, on the terrifying certainty of her intent. Ben's testimony was powerful. He spoke with quiet conviction, detailing the long, painful unravelling of his marriage, Serafina's infidelity, her manipulative behaviour, and the escalating harassment he had endured. He presented the saved text messages, her own words damning her, boasting about her affair, insulting him. The prosecutor read them aloud, and the shift in the courtroom atmosphere was palpable. It was hard for the defence to paint her as a fragile victim after hearing her own venomous, deleted words. The CCTV footage was the nail in the coffin. Seeing it on the courtroom screen, clinical and objective, removed any possibility of it being an accident. The car's path, the sudden acceleration, the deliberate turn towards us, the pause, the reverse, the second lunge, it was undeniable. Seeing Serafina's car as a weapon wielded with intent was horrifying, even knowing the outcome. During the trial, Serafina maintained her facade of wronged innocence, occasionally dabbing at her eyes with a tissue during particularly difficult testimony, usually Ben's or mine. But there were moments, fleeting glimpses when the mask would slip, a flicker of anger in her eyes, a tightening of her jaw. She couldn't maintain the performance perfectly. The jury's guilty verdict felt like a collective exhale from everyone who had been rooting for justice. It wasn't just a legal outcome, it was a validation of our reality, a refutation of Serafina's attempts to gaslight and manipulate. Sentencing was emotionally fraught. Hearing the impact statements, reading my own aloud, even though the prosecutor read it, the words were mine, was difficult. I wrote about the physical pain, the months of recovery, the lost sense of safety, the nightmares, the fear that now accompanied simple tasks like walking to my car. I wrote about how her actions had not only injured me, but had also tried to destroy the fragile new happiness Ben and I had found. Serafina's feigned remorse during her final statement was almost comical in its lack of authenticity, if the situation hadn't been so serious. "I wasn't myself that day," she repeated, the tired refrain. It felt like a slap in the face to hear her claim she wasn't herself when the video showed a woman clearly in control, applying makeup before attempting murder. 15 years. When the judge said it, a wave of conflicting feelings hit me. It was a substantial sentence, yes, it meant years of safety, of not having to look over my shoulder constantly, but it also felt short for the severity of the crime. Attempted murder. Premeditated. My life, Ben's life, had been put in grave danger. My leg was permanently altered. The psychological scars would likely last a lifetime. 15 years felt like a fraction of the cost. Ben felt it too. We talked about it afterwards, the strange mix of relief and dissatisfaction. "It's the system," he sighed. "First-time offender, no prior record, feigned remorse. They take all that into account." "But the premeditation," I argued. "She planned it." "Yeah," Ben agreed, his jaw tight. "We know that. Detective Miller knew that. The jury knew that. But the sentencing guidelines, they're not always about what feels fair." Despite the perceived leniency of the sentence, the practical consequences for Serafina were immediate and severe. Her life, as she knew it, was over. She was a convicted felon, facing over a decade in prison, and her criminal conviction had utterly demolished her standing in the divorce court. Mr. Davies explained it simply. Her entire case for alimony and assets was built on the premise that she was a wronged wife, or at least an equal partner in the marriage's breakdown. Trying to murder the other party and his new girlfriend tends to undermine that premise. He chuckled dryly. The judge essentially said the court wasn't in the business of financially rewarding attempted murderers. It was a swift, clean sweep. She got nothing. It was a small victory, a confirmation that her malice had backfired spectacularly on a practical level. She had tried to ruin Ben financially out of spite, and instead her actions had left her with nothing but a prison cell. Moving into the new house felt like turning a page. It was a fresh start, free from the physical and emotional residue of the past. We painted the walls, chose furniture together, slowly making it feel like home. The process of creating a new space was therapeutic, a tangible act of building our future. My physical therapy became less frequent, eventually tapering off. Sarah was pleased with my progress. "You're strong, Alara," she told me at our last session. "You put in the work. Keep moving. Don't let it seize up." The pain was still there, a background hum, especially on cold or damp days. My leg would ache, a dull throb reminding me of the metal inside. but I could walk, run, hike. I was mobile. I was independent. The psychological healing was a longer, ongoing process. Therapy helped me process the trauma, understand the mechanisms of fear and anxiety, and develop strategies for coping. I learned to identify my triggers: loud engines, certain types of parking lots, unexpected fast movements. I learned breathing techniques, mindfulness exercises, ways to ground myself in the present moment when the past threatened to overwhelm me. Ben was always supportive, but he also gave me space when I needed it. He understood that some parts of the healing journey I had to walk alone. He encouraged me to pursue my hobbies, to reconnect with friends, to rebuild my life piece by piece. We talked openly about our fears regarding Serafina's eventual release. It wasn't a constant topic, but it was there, a shared concern. We researched the parole process, discussed safety plans, made sure our families were aware and vigilant. Getting the concealed carry permits and taking self-defense classes weren't just symbolic. They were practical steps that gave us a sense of preparedness, a feeling that we weren't helpless. We also focused on building our relationship, deepening our connection. The trauma had tested us, but it had also accelerated the process of truly knowing each other, seeing each other's strengths and vulnerabilities under immense pressure. We had seen the worst of the world together, and we had chosen to build something good and strong in its place. Planning the wedding became a source of immense joy. It was a symbol of our commitment, a public declaration that we had survived and were choosing happiness. We picked out rings, tasted cakes, argued, lightly, over flower arrangements. These ordinary, mundane tasks felt incredibly precious after the extraordinary, terrifying events we had lived through. We decided to have the ceremony at a beautiful spot overlooking the ocean, a place that felt expansive and peaceful. It felt fitting, celebrating our new beginning with the vast, unpredictable sea as our witness. Life in Port Blossom settled back into a rhythm. The buzz about the trial eventually faded, replaced by a local gossip about town council meetings or the upcoming lobster season. We were no longer just the couple from the attack. We were just Ilara and Ben, residents of Port Blossom, building our life. My scars are a part of me now, a physical reminder of a dark chapter, but they are also a symbol of survival, of resilience. They tell a story of a woman who was knocked down but got back up, who was targeted by malice but chose to heal and to love. Serafina is in prison, serving her time. She is a consequence of the past, a reminder that darkness exists. But she is no longer the center of our universe. We have reclaimed our lives, our peace, our future. We are getting married next spring. We are building our home, our life, here in Port Blossom. It's not a perfect, trauma-free existence. There are still moments of fear, still physical aches, still psychological work to be done. But there is also deep love, unwavering support, and a profound sense of gratitude for the life we have. We learn that even when your world is violently shattered, you can pick up the pieces. And sometimes, the life you build from the fragments is stronger, more beautiful, and more deeply appreciated than the one you had before. Learning to navigate my apartment on crutches, mastering the art of showering with a cast, figuring out how to carry a plate of food, these small victories were just as significant, in their own way, as the successful surgery or the guilty verdict. They represented a slow, steady return to independence, a reclaiming of the physical autonomy that had been violently taken from me. Ben was endlessly patient during this phase. He'd anticipate my needs, fetching things before I asked, helping me up and down stairs. But he also encouraged me to push myself, to do what I could, to not become helpless. It was a delicate balance, providing support without fostering dependence, and he navigated it beautifully. My friends and family were also pillars of support. My parents drove up from Massachusetts multiple times, bringing casseroles and quiet comfort. They were understandably shaken by what had happened, terrified for me, but they focused on my recovery, offering practical help and emotional reassurance. Arthur continued to be a lifeline to the outside world, bringing laughter and distraction. It made me realize how important a strong support system is when facing unimaginable hardship. The legal process, while concluded in terms of verdict and sentencing, still lingered. There were appeals, procedural filings that Mr. C. Davies handled. Ben kept me informed, but shielded me from the more tedious or upsetting details. It was a relief to know that Serafina's legal team was still trying, but that their chances of overturning the conviction were slim, given the overwhelming evidence. The divorce, on the other hand, was blessedly final. The paperwork arrived, crisp and official. Ben was legally free. Free from the marriage, free from the financial demands, free from the direct legal ties to Serafina. It was a significant milestone, a clean break from the past that had nearly cost us everything. One of the unexpected challenges of recovery was the impact on my creativity. As a graphic designer, my work relied on a certain flow, a connection to visual ideas. For a while, the trauma seemed to have short-circuited that. My brain felt foggy, preoccupied with fear and pain. I struggled to focus, to find inspiration. It was frustrating, another layer of loss. My therapist suggested trying different creative outlets, things that were less tied to my professional identity, less pressure. I went back to the pottery studio even while still on crutches, just to sit and watch, to feel the clay, to be in that familiar, calming environment. Eventually, I started working with clay again, simple pinch pots, small sculptures. It was therapeutic, grounding. Working with my hands, feeling the material, connecting with something tangible, helped quiet the noise in my head. Slowly, my creativity began to return. Ideas started flowing again. I eased back into client work, taking on smaller projects at first. Each completed project felt like another step towards reclaiming my life, proving that the trauma hadn't broken my spirit or my ability to create. Ben was incredibly understanding about this as well. He never pressured me to work, just encouraged me to do what felt right. He'd look at my sketches, admire my pottery attempts, celebrate my small creative victories. As my physical recovery progressed, I started incorporating movement into my daily routine beyond just physical therapy exercises. Walks along the coast, initially short and tentative, grew longer and more confident. The rhythm of my footsteps, the sound of the waves, the vastness of the ocean, it was incredibly healing. The sea, which had always been a source of peace for me, became even more so. It reminded me of the power of nature, the cycles of tides and seasons, the way things constantly shifted and renewed themselves. The decision to take self-defense classes and get concealed carry permits was not made lightly. It was a practical response to a very real threat, but it also felt like a significant shift in my mindset. I had always believed in resolving conflict peacefully, in avoiding confrontation. Now, I was learning how to fight, how to use lethal force if necessary. It was a heavy responsibility, one we discussed at length. My dad, with his background, was invaluable. He taught us safe gun handling, the legal responsibilities, the importance of training and practice. He wasn't advocating for violence, but for preparedness. You hope you never need it, he'd say, but if you do, you need to know what you're doing, and you need to be sure, absolutely sure, that you're justified. Learning self-defense wasn't just about physical techniques. It was about situational awareness, about confidence, about not presenting yourself as an easy target. It was empowering, transforming the lingering fear into a sense of capability. Our new house in Port Blossom felt more and more like home. We adopted a rescue cat, a fluffy orange tabby we named Mariner, who quickly settled into his role as resident expert in napping in sunbeams. His purring presence added another layer of warmth and comfort to our lives. We started hosting friends for dinner again, small gatherings at first. Reconnecting with people, sharing meals and laughter in our own space, felt like another step in rebuilding our social lives, which had been understandably disrupted. Ben and I continued to grow closer, our bond deepening with each shared experience, both the difficult and the joyful ones. We had navigated the storm together, and we had come out on the other side stronger and more connected. We understood each other on a level that went beyond words, a shared understanding forged in the crucible of trauma. Planning the wedding became a joyful distraction, a tangible symbol of our commitment to the future. We chose a local photographer, a caterer known for using fresh Maine ingredients, a florist who understood my love for simple, natural arrangements. Every detail felt deliberate, a conscious choice to infuse our future with beauty and meaning. We talked about our vows, about what marriage meant to us. It wasn't just a legal contract, it was a promise to stand by each other through whatever life threw our way. We had already faced the worse, and we knew, with a certainty that few couples have, that we could face anything together. The lingering shadow of Serafina was still there, a quiet presence in the back of our minds. We knew the date of her parole eligibility, the earliest she could potentially be released. It was years away, but it was a fixed point in the future we couldn't ignore. We would file the restraining orders, take the necessary legal steps to keep her away. We would maintain our vigilance, but we wouldn't let the fear consume us. We wouldn't let her malice define our lives. We had survived. We had healed. We were building a future filled with love and hope, and that was the ultimate victory. Port Blossom continued to be our sanctuary, our home. The rhythm of the tides, the changing seasons, the predictable charm of the town, it was a grounding force. We found peace here, a sense of belonging. My leg still aches sometimes, especially before a storm rolls in off the Atlantic. The scars are still there, but they are part of my story, not the whole story. The whole story is about finding love, about resilience, about the incredible strength of the human spirit to heal and to build anew, even after being shattered. We learned that even in the most picturesque places, darkness can lurk. But we also learned that light is stronger, and we found our light together here in Port Blossom. As the wedding planning progressed, it felt increasingly like a defiant act of joy. Choosing colours, sampling cakes, discussing music, these were such ordinary happy activities, starkly contrasting with the darkness that had overshadowed our lives for so long. It was a conscious decision to focus on the positive, to pour our energy into creating something beautiful and celebratory. We decided to keep the wedding relatively small, mostly close friends and family, the people who had stood by us, who had supported us through the darkest times. They knew our story, the challenges we had faced, and their presence felt like an affirmation of the life we were building. Ben's family welcomed me with open arms. They had seen the toll the divorce and Serafina's behaviour had taken on him, and they were simply grateful to see him happy again, to see him with someone who brought peace and joy into his life. My own family adored Ben, recognizing the kind, steady man who had been my rock through everything. Their unconditional acceptance and support meant the world to us. The physical therapy had done wonders, but true recovery is never just physical. The mental and emotional aspects are often the most challenging. I still had moments of intense anxiety, particularly when unexpected things happened. A car honking loudly behind me, someone running up behind me on the street, even certain sounds in movies or on TV. My body would tense, my heart would race, and for a split second, I'd be back in that parking lot. My therapist taught me techniques to manage these moments. Deep breathing exercises, grounding techniques, focusing on my 5 senses in the present moment, positive self-talk. It took practice, conscious effort, but gradually, the intensity of these reactions began to lessen. They still happened, but they didn't consume me the way they once did. One of the most difficult parts of the psychological recovery was rebuilding my sense of safety in public spaces. Parking lots remained a significant trigger. I would plan my routes carefully, choosing parking spots near entrances, avoiding isolated areas. Ben was always understanding, patiently walking with me, standing between me and potential threats, offering reassurance. We developed little routines, subtle ways of checking our surroundings without letting it dominate our experience. We also made a conscious effort to not let Serafina continue to occupy too much space in our minds or conversations. We acknowledged the reality of her sentence and eventual release, discussed the necessary precautions, but we didn't dwell on her. She had already taken so much. We wouldn't give her any more of our energy or peace. Our life in the new house settled into a comfortable rhythm. Mornings started with coffee and Mariner the cat purring on the sofa. Work occupied our days, mine freelance design, Ben's job in town. Evenings were for cooking together, reading, watching movies, or just talking. Simple, ordinary moments that felt incredibly precious because we knew how close we had come to losing them. We continued our hobbies. Pottery for me, sketching and photography for Ben. We found a new photography club in Port Blossom, a small friendly group that met weekly. It was another way to connect with the community, to find shared interests beyond the trauma. Ben loved capturing the rugged beauty of the Maine coast. I enjoyed finding interesting textures and patterns in the everyday. The self-defense training wasn't just about firearms. We also took classes in Krav Maga, a practical self-defense system focused on real-world situations. It was physically demanding, but also incredibly empowering. Learning how to defend myself with my body, how to fight back if attacked, further reduced my feeling of vulnerability. My injured leg was stronger now, capable of powerful kicks and stances. We talked about the future, not just the wedding, but longer term. Maybe starting a family someday, building a life together that was rooted in love, stability, and mutual respect, everything that had been missing from Ben's previous marriage. It felt like a profound act of healing, of choosing life and creation over destruction and malice. The Port Blossom community continued to be a source of quiet strength. People here looked out for one another. Knowing that we were part of this community, that we weren't alone, was comforting. We supported local businesses, participated in town events, felt increasingly connected to the fabric of this place. My scars were fading, becoming less prominent, but they were still there. A physical reminder of the day my life changed forever. But they were also a symbol of resilience, of healing. They were part of my story, a chapter I had survived. Serafina's conviction and sentence had a ripple effect beyond just our lives. It sent a message, albeit one delivered through a deeply personal tragedy. It showed that extreme behavior, even stemming from divorce disputes, had serious consequences. While 15 years didn't feel like enough to me, it was a significant portion of her life she would spend behind bars. It meant years of safety for us, years to build our life without her immediate threat looming. We knew that the possibility of parole, of her eventual release, would require ongoing vigilance. Restraining orders are just pieces of paper, but coupled with our preparedness, our training, and the knowledge that law enforcement was aware of the history, it felt like a plan we could live with. We wouldn't live in fear, but we would live mindfully. Our wedding day was perfect, a crisp spring day, the sun sparkling on the water. Standing there exchanging vows with Ben, surrounded by the people we loved, felt like a miracle. My leg ached a little by the end of the night, but I danced. I danced with Ben, I danced with my father, I danced with my friends. It was a celebration not just of our love, but of survival, of resilience, of the future we had fought so hard to claim. Looking back, the journey from that terrifying parking lot to this moment felt long and arduous. It was marked by pain, fear, and frustration, but also by courage, support, and unwavering love. We learned that trauma leaves scars, both visible and invisible. But it doesn't have to define you. It can be a part of your story, a difficult chapter, but not the whole narrative. We chose to write the rest of our story ourselves, filled with hope, peace, and the quiet strength of two people who faced darkness together and found their way back to the light. Port Blossom, our beautiful, resilient town, is our home. The sea continues to inspire and soothe. And our life together, built on a foundation of honesty, trust, and shared experience, is the greatest testament to the fact that love and the human spirit can endure even the most violent storms. Life in Port Blossom settled into a comfortable rhythm after the wedding. The initial excitement faded, replaced by the quiet joy of building a shared life. Our little house felt more and more like a home, filled with our things, our routines, and the comforting presence of Mariner the cat. We found a local farmers market we loved, a quiet beach where we could walk when the tide was out, a favourite spot for ice cream with a view of the harbour. These small, everyday pleasures were incredibly grounding, anchoring us in the present, reminding us of the life we were actively choosing to live. My physical recovery continued to progress, though slowly. The ache in my leg was less frequent now, mostly noticeable after long periods of standing or during changes in the weather. The limp was minimal, something I was aware of, but most other people probably didn't notice. I was back to doing all the activities I loved, hiking, running, swimming in the ocean during the summer months. My physical therapist, Sarah, was thrilled with my progress. "You're stronger than you think, Ilara," she'd told me. She was right. The experience had forced me to confront my physical limitations, but also to discover a reservoir of strength I hadn't known I possessed. The psychological healing was ongoing. Therapy remained a crucial part of my life. I continued to work on processing the trauma, managing the anxiety, and rebuilding my sense of safety. The fear never completely disappeared, but it became less debilitating. It was like a shadow that sometimes flickered at the edges of my vision, but no longer consumed the light. I learned to live with it, to acknowledge it without letting it dictate my actions. Ben was still my greatest support. We talked openly about our feelings, our fears, our progress. We continued the self-defense training and firearms practice together. It was a shared activity that reinforced our commitment to mutual protection and preparedness. We also made sure to prioritize moments of pure joy and relaxation, consciously counteracting the stress and trauma we had experienced. The legal situation with Serafina was quiet. Her appeal was denied, as expected. She was serving her sentence in a state prison, a physical distance that provided immense relief. We received periodic updates through Mr. Davies, mostly procedural information. We knew she was there, incarcerated, unable to harm us. That knowledge was a constant source of peace. We were mindful of the future, of the possibility of parole. We had discussed it with Mr. Davies and with my father. We knew the steps we needed to take. Filing for permanent restraining orders closer to her eligibility date, ensuring law enforcement in both our area and the area around the prison were aware of the history. It was a necessary layer of planning, a way to mitigate the risk without living in constant dread. Our life together felt full and meaningful. We continued to pursue our passions, support each other's work, and invest in our relationship. We talked about our dreams, our goals, the kind of future we wanted to build. It wasn't just about surviving, it was about thriving. We found joy in the simple things. Cooking dinner together, watching the sunset from our living room window, reading side by side in comfortable silence, taking long walks on the beach, collecting sea glass. These moments of quiet connection were the foundation of our happiness. The community in Port Blossom continued to embrace us. We volunteered at local events, supported town initiatives, felt increasingly integrated into the fabric of the community. The initial curiosity had faded, replaced by genuine acceptance and warmth. It was a testament to the power of community, the way people can come together to support one another in times of need. My relationship with my family deepened. They had seen me at my most vulnerable, and they had seen me rebuild my life with strength and grace. My parents' pride was evident, and my bond with my siblings became even stronger. Ben was fully integrated into my family, loved and accepted as one of their own. Ben's family was equally supportive. They were relieved and happy to see him finally free from the toxic cycle he had been trapped in and building a healthy, loving future with me. Their support was invaluable, a reminder that we were not alone in this journey. We didn't shy away from talking about the past when it felt necessary, but we didn't let it define us. It was a part of our story, a chapter we had lived through, but not the whole narrative. We focused on the present, on the future, on the life we were creating together. My scars were fading, becoming less noticeable, but they were still there. A physical reminder of the trauma, but also a symbol of resilience. They were a part of me now, a testament to what I had survived. We learned that healing is not a linear process. There are good days and bad days, steps forward and occasional steps back. But as long as you keep moving, keep pushing, keep putting one foot in front of the other, you are making progress. Serafina remained in prison, a consequence of her own actions. Her malice had ultimately destroyed her own life and her own claims, while paradoxically clearing the path for Ben and me to build a stronger, more authentic life together. It was a strange, twisted irony. Our life in Port Blossom was not without its challenges, like any life, but we faced them together as a team. We had learned to rely on each other, to trust each other implicitly. We had faced the worst, and we knew we could handle whatever came next, as long as we faced it together. We were happy, truly, deeply happy. It was a hard-won happiness earned through pain and struggle, but that made it all the more precious. We didn't take it for granted. We cherished every moment, every quiet evening, every shared laugh, every walk on the beach. The future held uncertainties, as all futures do, but we faced them with courage, with preparedness, and with the unwavering strength of our love. We had built a life that was resilient, a life that was ours, here in the heart of Port Blossom. The sea air, the sound of the waves, the changing light, these elements of our coastal town felt deeply intertwined with our healing journey. The sea was powerful, unpredictable, capable of great storms, but also of immense beauty and calm. It felt like a metaphor for our lives. We were survivors, we were builders, and we were deeply in love. Years passed. Serafina remained incarcerated. The initial fear surrounding her sentencing faded into a dull awareness in the background of our lives. We dutifully filed the necessary paperwork for permanent restraining orders as her parole eligibility date approached. It was a bureaucratic process, a legal barrier we were erecting, a necessary precaution. Our life in Port Blossom flourished. Ben and I bought the house we had been renting, settling deeper roots in the community. We expanded the garden, adding more flowers and raised beds for vegetables. Mariner the cat, now older and slower, still reigned supreme on the sunniest spots. My design business thrived. I took on larger, more challenging projects. My creativity fully restored, perhaps even enhanced by the depth of experience I had gained. Ben continued to do well at his job. We were financially stable, building a comfortable life together. We continued our self-defense training, attending classes and practicing regularly. It had become more than just preparation. It was a form of exercise, a way to stay physically and mentally sharp, a shared activity that reinforced our bond. The firearms training was also maintained, a responsibility we took seriously. The scars on my leg had faded significantly, becoming pale lines against my skin. They were no longer the first thing I saw when I looked at my leg. They were just there, a part of my history, like an old photograph. The ache was less frequent, mostly just a twinge on cold, damp mornings. Psychologically, I had made immense progress. The intense anxiety had subsided. Triggers were less potent, less frequent. I could navigate parking lots without my heart pounding out of my chest. Nightmares were rare. Therapy had helped me integrate the trauma into my life story, rather than letting it define me. It was a chapter, a difficult one, but not the whole book. We had faced the darkness and emerged into the light. Our relationship was strong, built on a foundation of shared experience, trust, and deep love. We had seen each other at our most vulnerable, and we had chosen to stand by each other, to fight for each other, to build a future together. We talked about having children. It was a conversation we approached with care, acknowledging the complexities, the lingering shadow of Serafina. But the desire to create new life, to bring more love and joy into the world,